Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey podcast with Dr. Dan, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in English and French, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found on lifecoach.drdanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have our fourth episode of season 20, very special guest and host of The Fit Mess, the men's mental health podcast, Zach Tucker and Jeremy Grater. And just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to them to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Zach and Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks for having us. My name is Zach, and I have been, I've been struggling with mental health my entire life. Let's just put it that way. But only in the last 25 years have I gotten it under control and, fixed a lot of the demons and gotten myself to a place where I am the happiest and healthiest I've ever been. And, years ago, Jeremy and I were talking, and I was like, hey, let's do a podcast about just that. And he said, absolutely not. I'll turn it over to him now.
Yeah, that was the position I had at that point. But yeah, my name's Jeremy Grater. Thank you again for having us. I've been on my own happiness journey, like Zach, for most of my life, dealing with depression and anxiety issues, and really spent the last, like Zach, 10, 20 years kind of diving in, figuring out what is it that's making this happen, and is there anything I can do to get it under control? And I have found a number of things, but not always. Just a full disclosure, coming into this call, having a rough day at work. And when you were saying you're an anger management therapist, it's like, you know what, we should have a talk, because I'm pretty angry right now. But I'm glad to be doing this, because this is where my passion is. This is a lot of fun, despite telling Zach we would never do it. And the whole idea there was that I felt unqualified. I felt like we were not the people with the certifications and the things on the wall to tell people, this is what we found to be happy. But in the end, what we found to be happy is what works for us. And so if we can share those little things that can help people make those micro adjustments to their day that impact their entire lives, then it's absolutely worth it. And it's become a passion project for several years now.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. As we are podcast in the podcast community, I think we're here to be able to provide the help that people need and inspire the population, especially those who are struggling and have difficulties in expressing their concern to specialists or to friends, family, whatever it is. So this is the purpose of the happiness journey. So thank you again, guys. Again, it's very rare that I have a duo, especially that are podcast hosts, to be a part of my podcast as well. So maybe I will exchange a favor and be in yours as well. So tell me, whoever wants to go first, so you mentioned, both of you, that you are in your own journey to happiness. So if you could tell to our listeners, what was the best approach that worked for both of you? Because as you know, happiness is very subjective. What is happy for me may be different for you guys, or different for the 7.8 billion people living in this planet. So tell us a little bit more about what was your own personal journey.
I think for me, it's full of starts and stops. It's full of things that I tried. It's going all in, and I'm going to change absolutely everything overnight, only to fail a couple of weeks later and give up and feel like this is for other people. I'm not good enough. All the while having this cloud of depression lingering over me, telling me that, I can't consistently show up and be my best self, because that will show up at any point and drive me to behave in ways that are not productive and not allow me to live a full and happy life. But I've been spending a lot of time getting really humble, asking for a lot of help. And some of that started with Zach and I years ago, before the podcast started, because he was talking about some things he was doing to improve his health. And I found that really interesting, and asked him for more details. And what he shared helped me, shed 70 pounds. I lost a ton of weight. I got my physical health more under control. And that's, still an ongoing battle every day now. But it's really just getting humble and asking for help has been the biggest thing, because there are people on the path ahead of us that know how to make it work better. And they have the tips and suggestions. And I'm not looking for the guy on the mountaintop, right? I just need to know how to get around the next corner on the trail to eventually get to the mountaintop, hopefully. So really just several months ago, I was in a pretty dark place. I reached out for some help, and got it from a coach friend of mine. And he set me up with a workout plan and just tiny steps to start taking every day. And I can honestly say, like, I've now gone probably the longest stretch of my life without a depressive episode because of the steps that he showed me that were largely just physical movement, getting in, lifting heavy things,
Mhm.
eating the right things, prioritizing sleep. It's all the basics, right? It's the stuff we always talk about, but it's so hard to lock them in and to be consistent. And I have proven to myself now for several months that by doing that, I am able to keep the depression at bay much more than I ever have in my entire life.
But do you feel that people find this to be, even though it's simple in nature, it's very hard to sustain?
Absolutely, because nobody wants to do the work, right? That's the hard part, is doing it every day, no matter how mundane, boring, unmotivated we are, frustrated that it's not showing results. I went to the gym for 2 weeks and I still look the same in the mirror and the scale didn't move. Yeah, of course, because it didn't take you 2 weeks to get to where you are, right? It's a lifetime struggle. We all want the pill. We all want to walk into the doctor's office and say, how do I fix this tomorrow? How do I undo 30, 40 years of bad physical treatment to my body, bad mental treatment to my mind and spirit? What can I take today that will make it go away tomorrow? That's what we all want. And that's why we're not willing to do the work.
And for you, Zach, do you feel that this journey is very similar to what you've gone through yourself? And is this the reason how you guys got together in terms of wanting to create this podcast? Because it seems like you guys knew each other way before the podcast as like childhood friends. So was it something that brought you together for whatever reason?
Yeah, actually we didn't meet until we were actually I was 30, what, 33, 32, 33, 32. We didn't meet until we were in our early 30s when our daughters were born. Actually, our wives were pregnant at the exact same time, and
Okay.
they met through another group, and they were like, "Oh, well, my husband likes Star Wars, mine does too. Oh, my husband, like just all these things." So they introduced us at a breakfast one day, but it, from there it just kind of developed. Like we sized each other up. We were like, another guy, like, what do you think about that game last weekend? Knowing neither one of us cared about the game, it was kind of funny. But after a few years, we really started to have like these open and vulnerable conversations around, like, how you doing as a dad, how you doing as a boss, as an employee, as a husband, as a, like, all these different things that we have to deal with. And having our children at the same time really helped with that conversation too, because, like, we weren't sleeping and we were worrying about being a parent, and we were, scared that we were screwing this child up, or at the very least, like, setting ourselves up for massive debt in therapist appointments for the kid. Who knows? But I guess along the way, like, I was still working on myself, and what I found. So everything that Jeremy just said, absolutely double down on it. It's like the basics. The last few months I've been like sick and traveling and had like all these things in the way of my basic stuff, and I've actually been feeling my mental health going down. But what really changed for me was like the day where I realized that I just needed to be okay with where I am at that moment, and have plans for the future, and want to be better, and be healthier, happier, all the things. But the day I realized that I just had to say, I'm okay today. Like, I've got food, I'm breathing, my child's alive, bills are paid, like, I'm okay. Like, that switched it for me, where I wasn't constantly going, I need to be this, 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 and this. I could focus on the gratitude for where I am today. And I don't know, like, the happiness started to creep in a little bit more on that. And then I was able to take that next step to go to the next goal, and then to the next goal, next goal, next goal. But so often we constantly, we're our worst critics. We beat ourselves up for where we aren't, instead of celebrating where we are. Right. That's a huge shift that makes a big difference in my day.
But unfortunately for us, social media is not helping, because we have this point of comparison that we look at people that live a so-called life, which we know it's for most very fake. But then we say, well, why is he living this life and I am not? Why is this person having the jet, the Learjet, whatever it is, and I don't? Why this person live this wealthy life and I'm not? So again, if we are trying internally to be able to change our mindset, to be able to live a happier life, we have external components that are not contributing to succeeding in that level. So how can we just, unless if we separate completely from online social media and we live off the grid then no one can actually sustain what you guys just said. It's impossible to just look at what's going on out there and be happy with ourselves. So what is the right component?
To me, it's what you said. It's looking out. Stop looking out. Look in. What, like Zach said, what's right with right now? What if everything you're doing is right on time? What if you are exactly where you're supposed to be in your life and they're exactly where they're supposed to be? What if that Lear jet in that Instagram photo, they rented with their last 6 months of rent and now they're financially destitute because they wanted to have the perfect Instagram picture to look like they're living the life that you think you're supposed to live? Odds are they don't. So I suffer from this when I've got the apps on my phone. It's so easy to want to just escape, right? Like to open up the phone, start doom scrolling, image after image, story after story about everyone else is living a perfect life and it's amazing. And it's all nonsense. I mean, I would bet 98% of it is nonsense.
And you're generous.
Yeah. You have to stop looking out. You have to stop looking at what other people are doing and the way other people are living their lives, because you're never going to measure up. Like on what planet could you just suddenly magically live differently than what you are? And I would also suggest that even if you had that life, you would still have struggle. You would be looking at Elon Musk instead and go, how come I'm not as rich as him? How come I don't have everything that I want? You're just looking for the wrong input to validate who you are and your happiness. So stop looking out, start looking in, start looking at everything you have. Like Zach said, those moments of gratitude, taking the idea of writing 5 times a day, something you're grateful for in a journal, starts to rewire the pathway in your brain to focus on the good and all that you have, rather than looking at your phone every 5 minutes to validate all the reasons you suck and you're not good enough to exist on the same planet as those people.
So do you think that the minimalistic movement that's happening with tiny homes and so on and so forth, do you think that makes sense mentally for most, that they don't need to live in a large mansion or having 3 exotic vehicles? Do you think all this brings more happiness?
I think it contributes definitely to having more happiness, in the sense that you're not, you keeping up with the Joneses, right? However, honestly, in my mind, it really simplifies your life. So keeping up with the Joneses creates a really complicated life. So I've had a gigantic house before. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into it. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much to do and so much to fix and so much. You're just busy constantly. And on top of it, if you've got a family and you're trying to do all of those bits and pieces, and you've got the expensive car and trying to figure out how to pay for all of those things just overcomplicate your life. So I don't know if I could survive in a tiny house with anyone other than myself, just from that perspective. But like just the complexity of maintaining a household, like a whole household with a lawn and pool, like all the things, right? That frees up your time to practice gratitude, to like do all those other things. So from that perspective, yes. Again, a tiny home, me and a tiny home with someone else, I guarantee the other person's leaving within 24 hours, because small confined spaces with me, probably not a great idea.
Especially claustrophobic, yes.
Yeah. And a possible tangent here too. I think a lot of the tiny home movement is literally the cost of housing is completely out of control. So I think to some degree it's necessity, but to some degree it's smart people realizing this is all people can afford. Let's sell this. Let's find ways to make this cool. Let's find ways to make this, the marketable point of success, that you own something, right? But that being said, yes, minimizing the less you have, the less you have to take care of, the more you can like let go, the more space and freedom you create for yourself in your life. So I agree with what Zach was saying. And I also could not survive long in a tiny house with multiple people.
When you look at what Elon Musk, he sold all his property and now he lives in the warehouse of Tesla in like a box, basically. I think he understood that the value of life does not reside on what you own, but more what you could take advantage of the time that is being given to you. So as you said, Zach, if you get a mansion and you spend every single weekend to do the landscaping, well, I mean, if you're wealthy enough, you're going to get a landscaper and all that, but still problems will come one after the other. And then you're always going to be the one making the decision, okay, we have to call this person. So if your time is spent, whatever time you have available, because if you own a large mansion, chances are you're at the office 100 hours a week. So when are you going to take advantage of what you've built. And this is what the big problem is, that sometimes simplistic approach to life will reduce an enormous amount of stress and will give you the quality of life that you crave for. And people feel that, especially high achievers, they always want more and more and more. And when they get more, they ask this question, what's next? What else can I get? So it's like a hamster wheel. It never stops turning. So where do we give ourselves the break to say, you know what? I've achieved whatever I wanted to achieve. But then the question is that the final destination?
And it's not. That's the life I'm living right now. About almost 3 years ago, my family was living in a big city and doing the rat race in the car, in traffic, trying to pay bills, going deeper in debt every day, trying to take care of a house we couldn't keep up with, in a city we could no longer afford, that was getting worse and worse. And we decided, and COVID played a big part in this, but we decided enough. This is not what we want to spend our time doing. This is not the life we want to live. And we sold everything, got rid of everything, and moved to a smaller town in another country. Did a lot of research. We didn't just throw a dart. Well, we figuratively throw a dart, but where we landed is a much more rural, much slower pace. We kind of joke all the time that we live in the 80s. Like, it's way more chill, and our anxiety level has plummeted. We're not constantly in the car unless it's intentionally going somewhere that we all want to be a part of. We're not just in the rat race. We got out of it. And it's completely changed our lives. So we're so much happier, and it's created the opportunity for me to now spend some time on myself, spend some time working on my mental health, my physical health, because I'm not doing all these other things to pay a bill for a thing I don't really need to begin with. Right. So I'm living it. If you have the opportunity to let go and try something else that's a little slower, a little different, a little out of the ordinary, highly recommend it, because it's completely changed our lives for the better.
Do you think that the Fit Mess podcast is also some form of self-therapy? Because you basically take this as your own personal experience and you share with the world to let them know, okay, you know what? It's like, for example, for me, writing is some form of therapy. So I write books, I publish them, etc. And that helps me organize my mind, my thoughts, to be able to put into writing. So do you think that you've primarily utilized this podcast to be able to kind of heal what you have from inside?
It's definitely one of the things that both of us have taken advantage of. I mean, it's just science in that when you verbalize something that you've been thinking about, you activate different parts of your brain, and problem solving skills that you didn't have before will come to light. And Jeremy and I will get on to record a show. And I mean, it's happened. Well, lately it's happened a lot because I've been having some issues, but like, we get on to record a show and we don't end up recording the show. It just turns out to be an hour therapy session, just talking to the other person. Okay. And the other person's just going, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But the show itself, like, the main purpose of the show is to really get out there and make sure people understand that, like, Jeremy and I are normal guys. We suffer from these things. Like, it's not taboo to talk about. Like, you can talk about these things. But absolutely, like, especially in the beginning of the show, we were holding ourselves accountable to trying the things that we were talking about on the show. Not everything worked, and we were really honest about and forthcoming about the things that didn't work, but we still wanted to get it out there just in case it worked for somebody else, because you said earlier, not everything that works for one person is going to work for another person. Right. I know it's greatly benefited me. And as I think Jeremy would agree, I'm a high achiever. I've always been a high achiever kind of guy. Like, it has level set me over the years to kind of calm down that high achiever mindset for the most part. So absolutely, like, I use the show to verbalize, what I've been thinking about. It activates different parts of the brain. There's problem solving. Jeremy offers suggestions, to which I say, no. I won't listen to you. I'll never listen to you. And then someone else tells me the same thing. And I'm like, hey, Jeremy, did you hear about this thing? And he's like, yeah, same thing I told you weeks ago, dude.
But
absolutely.
That the reason why is it men's mental health, and we know that women also suffer from similar predicament. Is it because most of your guests were men and both of you are men, and this is where you focus primarily on this gender? Or do you feel that your experience was primarily focused on your own issue that are male related?
So our focus was male, just specifically because we feel like females have a much greater sense of their own mental health. While all of the topics that we talk about impact men and women,
Okay.
you know, as a man, I was raised to not show my feelings, to not say I'm having a problem, to just go figure it out, really just, you know, get up and put dirt on it and not feel it. And that's the way a lot of men have been raised. And our main purpose is to really, and women, again, on the other side, they know how to verbalize their feelings. They know how to talk about their feelings. They know how to kind of process them a little bit better. That's just historically the way things have been. And we're trying to break that trend. We're trying to make it okay for men to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to talk about their feelings and process their feelings and get through it. Because I mean, I've seen it in people that I know, family members, myself included. The longer you hold these feelings inside, the more they bottle up, pressure builds, and then you blow up and something happens, right? And you can't even put a number on the number of cases that police have been called for, like domestic abuse and things like that, because men aren't talking about their feelings. So that was our main reason, is to kind of get it out there and let people know that it's okay to talk about your feelings. You can still be a man. You can still change the tire. You can still go hunting. You can still go do all the things that make you a man. But adding this other piece of talking about your feelings and understanding your feelings and processing them makes you a better human being.
But
There's also just the fact that this is our experience, right? We're talking very much from our point of view and the things that we go through, and not being women, I would feel largely out of place telling women how to deal with their feelings and their issues, having never been a woman, at any point in my life. So.
But do you feel that also, because the recent statistics, when I speak to some of my colleagues who are divorce lawyers, it appears to me that more and more women are the one who initiate divorce because they do have a very strong circle of friends that they could actually share their feelings that you just mentioned. Unfortunately, the man is always left dried. I mean, they don't have the same circle of friends. They don't have the same kind of like ability to be able to express themselves because of the same reason that you said, Zach. And because of that, they're not the one initiating any divorce proceeding because they're too afraid of how to be seen or how to be perceived. And that in itself, they are afraid to say, well, if I lose my wife because of divorce, who else do I have?
Yeah, I think at the core of that is vulnerability, because men have a harder time making friends outside of their family because it requires vulnerability. It requires opening up and putting yourself in that position. So most men, I would argue, I don't have numbers to back this up, but I would argue most of them are going to the bar, having a beer, watching the game with their buddies, right? They're not having a real connection on an emotional level with most other men. So they don't have that real group of friends. And in the scenario you described, where someone's considering a divorce, when all they have is, Billy at the bar to watch the game with, yeah, that's terrifying, right? Like you have to be able to put yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be okay with the fact that people might not like you for you. You're not for everybody, and that's okay. But you are for somebody, and you're for a lot more people than you think. And by investing your time and your energy into the things that light you up, the things that excite you, that make life worth living for you, it's crazy how there's lots of other people living that same life. And when you start to connect there and share those experiences, then those bonds are formed and you have that community. And then I would also argue that that probably would prevent more of those divorces, because there's not that same dependency within the relationship for everything, right? If you've got another community, you've got other places to vent. The wife in that scenario doesn't need to vent to her husband. She's venting to her friends. He's got nobody. He's on an island and just has no place to put that. And so a lot of that comes out in negative ways, turns into bad habits and bad behaviors, and often addictions. So it's at the core of it. Guys just have to be more vulnerable. And I can hear guys screaming, "Oh, it's nonsense." Sorry. That's the key. Open up, be more vulnerable, and watch how life becomes so much more enjoyable.
But you think in the post-pandemic era, because of us being forced into isolation and loneliness, do you think that exacerbated how people may perceive the future without their spouse if anything happens in the relationship? And that in itself scares the hell out of them. And this is the reason why, even though they may be in an abusive relationship where the wife is the one physically being abusive to the husband, they will not disclose that because of the fear of being perceived as, I don't want to use that term on our podcast, but perceived as a weak individual. And so they will hold this in, and that will exacerbate their stress level, their anxiety, etc., which may cause or open up for a new mental illness. So do you think that all of this, because of the pandemic, it created a very unstable mental perspective when it comes to loneliness?
This is speaking from personal experience because I happen to have gotten divorced just at the end of the pandemic, initiated by me. Just saying, like, Jeremy and I had long conversations about it, and my ex and I were having issues, and we were talking about splitting up, and I processed my feelings and emotions, and for 3 whole days, Jeremy still makes fun of me, but like I felt it all. And at the end of it, I was like, this is the right choice for me. Like, I'm going to be happier at the end of it. However, in the moment when I was trying to figure it out and Jeremy heard all of these conversations, I felt this great sense of loss, this normalcy, this is my life. And what is my family going to think? And what is everyone going to think of me? And I'm, I know the word you were thinking of, looking weak here. That's what came up over and over and over again for me was, the pandemic can't make me look weak. Like, the pandemic couldn't get to me. I can, I'm not going to be a man because I can't let this happen. Like, all of those feelings hit me. So I think the pandemic actually, to your point, like, I think people doubled down on staying in bad spots because they didn't want to not only look like they couldn't handle their marriage, but couldn't handle their marriage on top of a pandemic, right? It makes you look even weaker. So I totally agree with you, but to what Jeremy was talking about earlier, like, I got divorced because I let those feelings in, because I processed them, because I was vulnerable, because I realized that I was in a marriage where I wasn't being treated appropriately. Okay. So completely agree with you 100%. The pandemic made the problem worse.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I think that the pandemic forced extremes. There was the extreme of, I'm going to lock this down and nothing's going to break me. And there's what we did and said, enough of this. We're out. We're going to do something different. We want to live a different life. And that's the way it went for us. In the end, though, I think it taught all of us, or is forcing us all, to relearn how to be social creatures. For 3 years, you were not supposed to go anywhere near anybody else and not leave your house, right? Like, how do you then go back to, hey, come here, give me a hug. How are you, buddy? Let me open up and be super vulnerable, even though I've been terrified for my life and my family for the last 3 years. So yeah, I mean, I see it in my kids. I see it in myself. I see it in a lot of people, that just the way we interact with each other has changed dramatically. And we need to relearn how to be what we are, which is social pack animals. Like, we need to learn how to be open with each other and make those connections, make those bonds, because there's just too much data that says you need to be in a community to be healthy.
Absolutely. So before we end the podcast, if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about the Fit Mess podcast that you guys have, just something brief before we end. So go ahead, Zach or Jeremy.
I think what you've heard here is a lot of what you're going to hear there. It's just guys opening up, being vulnerable. We do occasionally have guests, less so than we used to. It's mostly just Zach and I sharing our perspective, because we're not the guys on the mountaintop. We're the guys around the corner, a little bit ahead of you on the trail, and in some cases, maybe behind you. Maybe we can learn from you. So we just want to create a community for guys to be able to open up, be vulnerable, understand that they're not alone and trying to get their lives under control. We always, we joke that, the show's for guys who are sick of their own stuff and want to get out of their own way. We're just trying to help clear that path a little bit and make the mess a little bit less messy, so you can live a little bit more of a fit life.
So do you think that your topic focus for each episode, or you just basically are open conversation about everything?
No. I mean, it's very much focused on the struggles that we're having and the tools that we're implementing to use them, or how the tools maybe are failing us and why we need new ones. We turn to each other for support when something's not working, or, just really kind of sharing, yeah, me too. This is what I do, and this also works for me. Or that guy, we literally got a message from a guy in our Facebook group the other day saying, I just can't get motivated to do anything. And the cool thing is, before either of us could jump in, the community was like, have you tried this? You could do this. Read this article. It's got 10 things. And it's, we're just trying to help people not have to rely on motivation. Just take the action that creates the momentum that leads to that better life. So yes, anything and everything in the mental health and sort of wellness space is where we go, but each episode is specifically focused on one aspect.
And what is the podcast channel? I mean, where can they find it?
Our website is thefitmess.com. So fit mess, just like a messy house. So thefitmess.com.
And on YouTube, do you guys have recording on YouTube about your podcast, or is it mostly audio?
We are mostly audio. We have a lot of short form video you'll find on YouTube and all the different social media channels. But you know, don't let me send you to social media to find your entertainment.
Yes.
However, if you happen to be scrolling, you can follow us there and hopefully get some motivational tips.
Beautiful. Any concluding words, Zach?
Nope. Jeremy has said it all. Like I said, we try and get on and be open, honest, and vulnerable, and really just show people that they're not alone. Like the thoughts that you're having about anything and everything mental health, like a lot of us are having, and it's not taboo anymore.
Beautiful. Well, guys, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us, and thank you both for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode, and I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 20 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Taking care of your physical and mental health is our sacred responsibility. In nurturing ourselves, we cultivate the strength needed to face challenges, the resilience to bounce back from setbacks, and the clarity to embrace life's beauty. By prioritizing our well-being, we not only enrich our own journey, but also contribute to a world where each individual thriving health creates a ripple effect of positivity and resilience. Embrace this responsibility, for within it lies the power to lead a fulfilling and purposeful life. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.